All right, awesome. It is 7 o'clock on Monday, February the 28th, and I would like to call this regular meeting of Kimberley City Council to order here on the homelands of the Ktunaxa peoples. Welcome, everybody. We have council have seen this as they have reviewed their package. We have a really full agenda tonight. So I will attempt to move things along expediently, but not at the expense of the discussion that we need to have on the available items. I would ask for council to, please let's stay focused, and hopefully we'll get out of here before 10 o'clock tonight. Reminder to staff, as you are presenting, please turn on your video. Not necessary if you're not presenting, but as you present, it helps not only us here in the council chamber, but also those watching on YouTube to see who it is that's speaking. All right, with that, I see a couple of late items in the agenda. Vicky, are these the only two we're dealing with this evening?
Yes, they are.
All right, so on the first one, the sign development variance permit, if it's okay with council, we'll deal with that under item 2.2 under bylaws, permits, and policies. And with respect to the second, what I'd like is a mover to receive now. Councillor McBain, thank you. And Councillor Dallum seconds. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Since it has been received, it will be dealt with as part of 2.1, which is the development variance permit for 2501 Rotary Drive. All right, good enough for the housekeeping. Any questions? All right, excellent. Could I have a mover to adopt the agenda as amended? Councillor McBain, thank you. Councillor Goodwin seconds. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Next up, we have the adoption of council minutes, the regular meeting minutes held on February the 14th. Councillor Roberts moves and Councillor Oakley seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor? That motion is carried. Okay, first up tonight, we have a statutory public hearing. And I will say, finally, I think this is our third try on this particular public hearing, which relates to 2665 Warren Avenue, which is the Western Lodge. So what I will do, because public hearings are formal beasts, I will read out the public hearing procedure. We'll have our planning manager talk a little bit about what we're trying to achieve, and then we will move forward with any statements from the public. So bear with me while I go through the formal side. We will be hearing submissions by telephone. If anyone is listening via YouTube stream that would like to share their comments on these bylaws, please call now. That number is 800-741-7180. That's 800-741-7180. And when prompted, enter meeting number or access code 2481-523-1467. Once again, that access code is 2481-523-1467. When asked for a password, simply enter the pound or the hashtag symbol. And once you're connected, you'll be able to hear the meeting, but will be muted on hold until it's time for your turn to speak. If you're listening to live stream while on the phone, please make sure to mute or turn down the volume of the live stream to avoid causing any audio feedback. There is a delay between the proceedings here in council and what you see on YouTube. You may let us know that you would like to speak by entering *9 on your phone to raise your hand, and you will know when it's your time to speak when you hear that your microphone has been unmuted. We ask everyone for patience during the meeting, as we will be moving slowly to allow ample time for switching between speakers. And there is, as I mentioned, there's a minor delay between the live stream and the telephone audio. Hopefully we will be back in council chambers for these public hearings in the not too distant future. But until we get there, we appreciate your patience. Any person who believes that their interest in property is affected by the proposed bylaw will be given an opportunity to be heard. No one will be or should feel discouraged or prevented from making their views known. Members of council may ask questions of you during your presentation for clarification purposes. However, the main function of council members at this hearing is to listen to the comments presented and not to debate the merits of the proposed bylaw or any comments that are presented. You will be given 5 minutes for your presentation. I will call for presentations 3 times before closing the hearing. Once the hearing is closed, we will be dealing with this item later in tonight's meeting. Thanks for your patience on this, folks. Now, Troy, can you please give us an overview of what we're doing with this bylaw?
Indeed, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Excuse me, bylaw 2709 is an amendment to our zoning bylaw 1850 to rezone the property located at 2665 Warren Avenue from the CD1 zone to the C1 general commercial zone for the purposes of allowing future commercial development on the property, including a planned microbrewery and retail space within the existing building. That's really just it for the overview at this point. It's a simple map amendment to rezone the property, and no other planned improvements anyways identified at this time.
All right, excellent, Troy. Thank you very much. Do we have any submissions that have come in, written submissions that have come in, Vicki?
We do not, and there are no callers on the line.
Okay. We have no submissions. However, it is a formal hearing, so I will call for submissions a first time. Call for submissions a second time. And for a third and final time, submissions. All right, with no further submissions at this time, the public hearing on proposed bylaw 2709 is now closed. Okay, next up, we have delegations, and we in fact have 3 delegations this evening. Pretty much all of the delegations are packed with information, and ahead of time, I would ask the folks on the delegation to try and keep your comments and summaries to between 10 and 15 minutes. I know given the PowerPoint presentations that we have ahead of us here, that might be a bit of a challenge, but I would ask that you attempt to do that in any event. First up tonight, we have Sergeant Woodcox and our quarterly Rcmp review. Steve, welcome to council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for council for allowing me to present the third quarter of 21-22, encompassing the months of October to December of 2021. Overall, the calls during this quarter were at 344. That's down about 60 files from the same time last year. Some of the most public calls were the 2 arsons we had that occurred in December, the one at the Kimberley Gymnastics Club and then one at the Kimberly Alpine Resort. I can't thank again the public for calling in to help us in assisting in solving the Kimberley Gymnastics Club. We're only as good as the people that are out there, the eyes and ears, and I really want to thank the community for stepping up and calling and assisting us in solving that. That include considerable amount of resources, numerous judicial authorizations, but we're very confident we have the right individual in that case, and we're very hopeful that in the future we can solve the arson at the Kimberly Alpine Resort as well. We've worked very closely with the management team there. And again, we implore that if anyone has information, please step forward and call us. One thing I didn't mention on the quarterly report, but one thing I do want to mention, we've had a very increased amount of calls of fraud, including people purchasing stuff on the internet to people they don't know. And they send some money to an email address, whether it's somebody on a Facebook or a chat thing. A lot of people are getting defrauded in that, and it makes it very difficult for the police to investigate when the individuals that are giving the money to people have never actually met the individuals. So again, we ask the public, if you're going to buy some items online, one of the good things to do is maybe meet in a public place, whether it's in a parking lot at a mall, whether it's at a parking lot at the police station, but meet people in person and because some of this is getting to be, we see repeat offenders. Talking to Crown Counsel on a regular occurrence about some of these files. And when the individuals don't meet the person that is defrauding them, it puts us, the police, at a very disadvantage to try to investigate some of these files. So that is becoming something that we're seeing more often. In regards to mental health, we have 11 calls this quarter, up 1. That's kind of staying on an even keel, which is good. No COVID complaints. I think hopefully we're through the worst of that, but that's become something we're not dealing with too much on a daily occurrence. I wanted to make reference to the assistance we got from Kimberly Search and Rescue. There was 3 files during the quarter that we used them, missing hunters, I think it was missing sledders. But again, just like we used them last summer for the fires, they're an invaluable resource, and I just wanted to kind of give the shout out to them because they're an invaluable resource to us. 3 sudden deaths during the quarter. That's kind of normal. We haven't seen any spike in that. And during the quarter, there was 8 assaults. Like I said, we were down some in resources. We've had a number of people off for various ailments. Some of those people are coming back. So I'm hoping we can get the resources back to where we were earlier in last quarter. So, and I'd be happy to take any questions from council.
I've noticed a lot of duct cleaning on Facebook lately. Is that one of the fraudulent activities?
I haven't heard the duct cleaning one. Most of the things is people selling items on whether it's a Kimberly buy and sell or Facebook, where people are asking for money's transferred to someone when they've never met, and the other party just simply doesn't hand over the goods. So.
I noticed the only thing that's really up is the threats and harassments. Is there anything there that's new?
No. Just a blip, probably. It's up and down every other quarter, and I can't say that's related to anything in particular.
Go ahead, Councillor Dallum.
I know that some detachments have a camera out front. Do you guys have a camera that people could do transactions and have it on media?
Yeah, we do have video surveillance and around the detachment. But like I said, some of the things it's good just to meet in public. If anything goes wrong, there's witnesses and you're not alone. So whether it's a parking lot of a store that's open or somewhere at the detachment parking lot, if someone doesn't want to meet you in a public place, there's probably a reason. So just for security, it's the best thing.
So does the RCMP automatically get called on sudden deaths?
Yeah, so every sudden death, the RCMP is notified, and that's simply for the RCMP to attend and make sure that that death is not suspicious. And every sudden death we go to, we contact BC Coroner Service to attend as well. But that is a routine thing, that sudden deaths occur at someone's home and that the RCMP is called.
All right, thank you. Councillor Roberts.
Steve, did you have to send anybody to Ottawa?
No.
That's good.
Have you sent someone anywhere else?
Well, during the year, we send people, so we've had the Ferry Creek injunction with the logging and stuff like that. We've sent people throughout the year, numerous occasions to that. But that's the only thing we send people to.
All right, excellent. Last call, council. All right, hearing none. Thanks very much, Steve. We appreciate you taking the time to come.
Thanks for giving me the time, everyone.
Bet. All right, next up, we have Stevenson Engineering to present a report on the Kimberley Civic Center and Marysville Arena building condition assessment. Council may recall that I guess it was much earlier, just prior to Nicole coming on board, we had requested an assessment, and since then, our facilities manager has begun assessments on all of the facilities that we have as part of our asset management plan. And tonight we have the first of these coming in, which are on our 2 arenas. So who is speaking for Stevenson this evening?
Evening, Mayor McCormick.
Yeah.
I believe Lawrence McSorley will be, and I'm not quite sure if we've solved the technical issues we're having.
We were still trying to solve the technical issue. He's gonna call into the meeting. He's not able to join on WebEx. So we should, if we want to proceed with the next delegation, and then we can come back to the Stevenson's engineering after.
All right, Greg, are you ready to rock and roll?
Right.
You bet, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. All right,
right.
so we'll start then with the proposed budget presentation by Greg Bradley for the Kimberly Public Library Board. So go ahead, Greg.
Okay,
Floor is
thank you.
yours.
Great, thanks. Just shifting a couple screens here. Okay, thank you, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to discuss our 2022 proposed budget. My intention is to highlight some of the line items, and I'll be happy to answer any questions at the end or at any point. And with that in mind, I will kick things off. On the revenue side, our primary funders are the city, of course, the regional district, and the province, which is listed as the LSB grant, the Library Services Branch grant. What we're proposing for 2022 is a 5% increase on the City of Kimberley, as well as the RDEK grant line items, which represents essentially what the inflation is right now, and that's what we kind of pegged it as at 5%. The library.
Hey everybody, it's Larry McSorley. I was able to call in.
All right, just hang on, Leonard. We've gone to the third delegation, and we'll come back to you shortly.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, you bet. Sorry, I've just lost the screen share of that spreadsheet now, though. I can pull it up on my side. Are you able to see the spreadsheet on your end? Okay, there it is. So yeah, a 5% proposed increase on the City of Kimberley grants and the RDEK grant. The Library Services Branch grant, provincial funding is as always kind of a shot in the dark. We've had essentially no increase in provincial core funding. No library has for over a decade. When I was preparing this budget, I actually came across a 2011 budget document, and the budget for LSB then was 44,210. So in the course of 10 years, it's kind of had a whopping 4% increase in provincial core funding. Now this past fall, there was a fair bit of optimism during the provincial budget consultations with the BC Library Association, the Library Trustees Association, the Directors Association, and various libraries, collaborating with a push to increase provincial core funding to $22 million in 2022, which is up from its current $14 million. From all reports at the time, this was quite well received, and there was a lot of optimism. And then, of course, we had the flood emergencies this past winter in the lower mainland and the interior, which certainly quieted things down as far as what we were hearing from the province. And at this point, we've had no indication of any increase or stable contributions from the province for the LSB grant. So for us as a library, that is one of our key questions and key concerns is the stability of that provincial funding on a year-to-year basis. And every library in the province is essentially in the same boat there. The next line item is the other grants, and we're showing a pretty significant increase there, and that's a commitment from the board to seek out both operational and special project grants to support library operations, certainly for this year and ideally for subsequent years as well. So there will be some significant activity by the board on the grant side of things. Little change, interest is interest. The ILL rebate is the interlibrary loan, and essentially that's the sharing of books across libraries throughout the province. And Kimberly tends to be a net beneficiary of the rebate side. It's meant to cover postage. And so on the expenditure side, you see a pretty significant outlay for postage, and that's the interlibrary loans. We tend to benefit in the positive on that over the course of a year. Donations outside of the Friends, we've pegged at $500 this year. With the Friends of the Library donation, just confirmed at $13,000. And as always, we thank the Friends for their very generous contributions to library operations. And it's really their funding that covers a lot of the fun stuff in the library and some of the discretionary expenditures that the board and director are able to make over the course of the year comes directly from the Friends of the Library. So as always, we thank them for that. Very little change on the remaining line items. And that leaves us with a total proposed revenue of $326,700. And then on the expenditure side, so this is where the board has made some decisions on some expenditures, and so you will see some adjustments here. Audiovisual purchases, largely DVDs and kind of hard goods of that nature. We're pegging at $2,000 this year. And no great surprise that there's less demand for that type of material now, but there is still a number of patrons who do utilize those, so we don't want to cut that out entirely. But we have reduced it down to $2,000. Audit and author tours, essentially in the same ballpark. Automation equipment is computers, printers, and items of that nature. And little change from 2021 budget, less than what was our actual was for last year. Automation operating is the maintenance side of all the computers and equipment and iPads we have in the library. And we're pegging that down a little bit from previous at $10,000. Books, we are showing a decrease down to 25,000 from 33,000. And we are augmenting, we'll see a little bit later, the e-content side to make up for that. There is, we've seen, certainly during COVID, fewer patrons physically in the library, which reduces our actual physical book lending. But our e-content has increased, by a commensurate amount over that time. So we've taken some from the physical books and shifted that to the e-content with the assumption that shift to the more online resources is going to continue for the next few months anyways, and possibly for the remainder of the year. Periodicals, newspapers, about the same range as where we've been in the past, less than 2021 actuals, but in the same ballpark. Equipment, shelving, furniture is part of that would be expenditure that we're intending from the Friends grant, and so that's the offsetting item for that, or a portion of their grant. Looking at buying some new shelving for large print format materials. Got some other items. Sorry. Office library supplies, including PPE, and that was a big expense last year, which hopefully we've incurred the bulk of those expenses. You know, the partitions between desks and the plexiglass partitions between patrons and the checkout counter. You know, those costs have been incurred, and hopefully we don't have to incur anything like that again. There is some ongoing costs, you know, on the PPE side. Things like masks and you know, items of that nature, but hopefully again that will be reduced in coming months, and so I think we'll be back to essentially where we were in kind of pre-COVID times. Postage is, you know, that's a big line item for postage, but that is the interlibrary loan, and so the difference between our rebate, I think, was 4,600, and our outgoing postage is between 3,000 and 3,500. So like I said, we are a net beneficiary of that. The e-content, we are boosting up that line item. And wages and benefits, this year we are showing an increase, and you know, moving ahead, we would expect that to come back down to where it's been in the past. You know, this being an exceptional year for that. Bookkeeping expenses are a little more expensive than past years, but kind of in line with what we assume them to be. And that gives us a total expenditures of 333,420, and a net operating deficit of just shy of 7,000. That's $6,720. With that, I'm happy to review any questions from council or from the mayor.
All right, thanks very much, Greg. Before I open it up for questions, I would just like to thank you for your continuing longtime service as chair of this board. It in many respects is a bit of a thankless job, and you continue to serve the library board well.
Thank you, appreciate that. And
Council.
I'll pass the thanks on to the board as well.
Excellent. Councillor Oakley.
Thank you very much, Greg, for all your hard work and over a long period of time. It's truly much appreciated. I have a couple of things I would like to ask of you. You have accessed the Kimberley Community Grants process for various things over time, I believe, and I can't remember what it was. I thought was it not furniture? Did that happen? Was there? I just thought I'd ask about that.
Yeah, I believe at some point we have. I wouldn't know the details on particularly of that, Constable.
The reason I'm asking is I just think that that to me, because the library is a core service in the community, should be considered, you know, for various things. I mean, the Friends of the Library combined possibly with a community grant could provide some activities and, you know, or even furniture as it was in the past. So there's that point I just wanted to make. I think because it is a core service, it should be given some degree of priority in the community grant process, and we do that annually. And the other thing I wanted to ask of you was the Friends of the Library donation has gone up significantly. Is there a process that the library board has done to get the word out that people could donate through their estates, or, you know, is there a connection to the lawyer's office from the library, for example? Has that happened?
Yeah, I don't believe there's a formal process in place such as that. You know, we've been lucky enough, you know, certainly historically, to have been recipients of bequests from estates. But yeah, I'm not sure of a formal process that's been set up to make that happen.
If I could just finish, Mr. Mayor, just Greg, just on that point, I guess the reason I ask about that is I think that's when you, you know, to me, the library in some respects remains invisible when it comes to those opportunities. And I don't know myself how you would market that or reach out, but I do think that there may be some help, you know, with that, with the states and bequeaths, you know, possibly. I mean, other organizations do that. So anyway, I don't know, the board, if the, there might be opportunity there, it might be worth exploring that. That was just a comment of mine. Thank you.
Thanks,
Well,
Councillor Oakley.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Further? I have one question, Greg, and that is with regard to the other grants. So you talked, it's fairly significant increase this year, and you talked about a focus. Is there specific, pardon me. Sorry about that. Are you pointing to specific areas of opportunity, or is this just a general focus that staff and board will be under this year?
Yeah, it's more of a general focus at this point. You know, we've done some early investigations in some grant opportunities, and there's a couple that do look promising, but you know, we haven't pegged down to particular grants or amounts of those particular grants, so we'll be searching out.
Okay, thanks, Greg. Further? All right. Hearing no further questions, thanks very much, Greg. Appreciate the presentation. We will chat again soon.
You bet. Thank you all.
Okay, one step back to the presentation by Stevenson on the Marysville and the Civic Center facilities review. Are you there, Lawrence? I see your phone number.
Yeah, so I'll probably have to have somebody run the slideshow on your end.
All right, Vicky will look after that. Just give us 1 second. So, so you've got about 20 or so slides. It might be a challenge to get that done in 10 or 15 minutes, but if you could attempt to do that, it would be appreciated.
Sure, absolutely. I'll go pretty quickly. All right, we'll start off right away with slide number 2. Basically what we did is we looked at those 2 buildings for life cycle replacement, also included the architectural site, structural, mechanical, electrical components of each building. We looked at repairs that were needed, maintenance, life cycle replacements, and we also did some priorities for these components, and any consideration for any codes that really we had to get addressed. So in particular, for accessibility, that was one of the major ones, these 2 buildings. The next slide. We basically went to visit both of these facilities back in November. We interviewed some folks on site. We did a tour of the building and did our photo documentation and reviewed existing conditions. Next slide. Just a review of your 2 buildings. The Civic Center is now 60 years old. Marysville is a little bit newer, 48, but again, that was that outdoor arena that was made into an indoor arena. So the actual slab surfaces and things, some of the components are actually older. Next slide. Basically, we found that your capital needs for the next 20 years is about $6.8 million. Breaking that down, there's some immediate items that have to be looked after for some investigations, about $72,000, about 5.7 for years 1 through 5. And then the mid is considerably less, about 400,000, and then years 11 through 20 is 706,000. Next slide.
So just to be clear, that is the combination of both facilities, correct?
That's correct. Yes. And then there's the next slide shows kind of the pie charts of where that money is focused on. There's some structural issues in both buildings, so there's a bigger chunk of that related to the first 5 years. But generally, it's a lot of architectural finishes. The following 6 years to 10, the architectural pie becomes much larger, and that's pretty consistent because those are when the finishes have to get switched out at the end of their life cycle. Next slide, please. So each building has its own unique capital requirements, but since both these buildings are using similar functions, there's a lot of similarities between the two. Since there's a 20-year timeline, some of the elements that we looked at actually have to be replaced twice during that 20-year cycle. So things like carpeting and paint likely would have to be done 2 times during that cycle. Next slide. Breaking the two out, it's about 4.1 for the Civic Center, 2.7 roughly for the Marysville Arena, and then the replacement values at today's dollars for each of those buildings. That's based on the current footprint that you have.
Yeah, I've got a question. Got a question for you here, Lawrence. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Sure.
my question was about replacement value, and I think you partly answered it. So it's based on the area of the building. You have some kind of formula that looks at what current costs are?
Yeah, based on the type of building. So we use like a square foot costing manual for different types of facilities. So these were both hockey arenas that we were looking at based on the size of the facility. So it didn't take into consideration any other use or any other component outside of just a hockey rink with stands.
Okay, I was a little surprised at how close the two figures were to each other, because I think my impression is that the Civic Center is much more of a building than the Marysville Arena. And to replace everything that happens at the center, I would have thought would have cost more than to replace the Marysville one.
We had them at similar square footage, is what we had, the information we had. So that's why the numbers are close.
Yeah, the
So
actual, when I measure the square footage using the planning portal measurement tool, I come up with different numbers. So we'll have to look into that from our end, I guess.
Okay, certainly.
Thanks, Ken. Go ahead, Lawrence.
Sure. The slide number 9 just kind of talks about this facility cost index. This is kind of the benchmark that most public sector buildings use. Is actually created by the Department of Defense in the United States. Basically, it kind of rates buildings for their current condition, and it's a value of what the deferred maintenance is with the replacement value. So kind of give you those criterias there. So you can even compare your buildings against another town's, for instance, if they're using the same FCI formula. Next slide. So your buildings, right now, the Civic Center is the one that's having the most difficulty. You're starting out with it in a critical condition already. This top bar there, it shows that if you did no funding whatsoever, it would remain critical and actually continue to decline, as you can see. The Marysville was a little bit better condition. It would be in the poor condition, but again, this is just showing that there's no actual additional money. That's just if you just looked at the whole 20-year period. Next slide. In addition to the ratings and everything that we did, we also looked at priority ratings as far as if there were one of these categories, if they were potentially critical, not yet critical, and recommended. Some of the things that we did put, the way we look at our assessments is that if something's already past its life cycle but was in more or less acceptable condition, we automatically push that to year 5. But there are certain things that if it's a potentially critical item, there would be a risk to that. So in other words, if your ice plant, is well beyond its years and you wanted to hedge it, once it's well past its life cycle, you never know when it's going to fail. So if one of these components was to fail, it would have a negative impact on the operations of the building. So we kind of try to also put this priority rating into there as well. So some things like finishes, carpet, paint, things like that, obviously don't have the same issues if you defer it, but some things like the building heating plant and ventilation systems, things like that, would, might have to close the facility down while the repairs are being made. The next slide just breaks out all these different items for the 5-year period by breakout by where the money was going. So a lot of little things, but there were a couple of big ticket items in there. Dasher boards, we did the slab ice piping and the slab itself within that system for both buildings. So if you go to the next slide, that kind of breaks it down for the remainder of the Civic Center and then also the Marysville Arena where the monies were allocated. The next slide. We always recommend that you look at these buildings every 5 years because things do change over time. You might have had a weather event where the roof looked okay at this review, but maybe in 5 years, even if you thought you could defer it, maybe the roof is, degraded more, then you might have to move that up the timeline. So that's why we never move things beyond 5 years in our, if it's past its life cycle, even if it's in good condition. So basically, the outlying years of 6 through 20, you're able to kind of see where things might be planning for in your capital planning. The next slide, we took out the Civic Center here as an indicator. If you spent all the money that you had needed in the next 5 years, the condition rating does improve, but it still remains in that negative critical stage of the building, mostly due to its age. Next slide. But when you look at the funding scenarios, as long as you do, this shows you how the funding, if you're doing 100%, 75, 50, or 25%, how that impacts the overall FCI score of the building over the life of the next 5 years. So if you were to spend all the required money, you could actually get the Civic Center into a fair condition. And then if you do it, only 75% of the needed repairs, it gets to a poor, and then 50% still is in poor, and then 25% is when it's in the critical still condition. So it just shows you the importance of the funding. Next slide. This is just kind of a generic slide, just shows that, building over time always does decrease in its condition just because it ages. That's just what happens. But if you're able to keep up with it incrementally, you're able to bounce the building back up to a better condition. Still going to go down over time, but you're able to keep up with the building, as opposed to these big peaks and valleys where you let things really deteriorate so far, and then you have a huge capital requirement to really get it back to a functioning condition again. Again, none of this is showing any program changes or changes of use or anything like that. It's just replacing what you have, like for like, to keep your building going for the next 20 years. Next slide. This is just kind of another way of showing over the next 5 years how the different funding scenarios have impacts on the facility, with the starting FCI score and its ending score with the different funding scenarios. Next slide, please. Quickly, your town, we looked at the demographics. Median age is 44. You have had considerable population growth. You're probably going to continue. We understand that there's a fair amount of people that are retiring in your town, that there's some people that are moving from other neighboring towns to live here. That may impact your demands a little bit. There's still going to be a lot of demand for recreational facilities, but there also might be a need for some senior programming as well. Next slide. And then, kind of planning considerations. This is kind of where you have to try to take some of this information. Do these buildings currently work well for you? They were built, 60 years ago. Things have changed. Towns changed. Do they still really function well for, what their use is? Co-ed functions, things like that weren't really happening 60 years ago. So has that, increased the demand and the use of these buildings? Are there other functions that, are trying to use these buildings, and would be, is there a need for community space, meeting rooms, things like that, that you don't have, that, that would be ideally considered in a new function replacement facility. Another thing is, can these buildings be repurposed into something else? If you build something new, or, is it something that is it worth the renovations of putting a lot of money back into these buildings? And then if you have the physical size of sites to do this, I know Marysville's is currently closed right now, from what we understand. Is the town need 2 sheets of ice or not? Those are some of the questions you have to think about a little bit. And then how long should you wait? How much time is left in the building? We generally always say a building has about an 85-year lifespan for a typical structure. That doesn't mean that they can't last longer. Obviously, there's a lot of buildings that are, over 100 years old that are still functioning. But particularly the Marysville building, that as a metal buildings type of structure, those just don't have the same life that the Civic Center does. But the Civic Center, again, is an aging facility. The original wood structure wasn't really designed to current snow loads and things like that either. So there are, those things to keep in mind with an aging building. Next slide. That's basically what I was just talking about there. How you would then think about some of these other factors. This is kind of, you would run some feasibility studies to see what the town thinks as far as, what other, can you combine functions into a new facility to economize on it? If you had both ice sheets next to each other, certainly there would be, some economies of scale there. Are there other functions that could be joined to the Civic Center that it then, has a bigger role in the town other than just as an ice facility? So you need to do some public engagement. You need to develop what a program plan might be for a new building or an expanded building, and then what those different types of concepts might look like and their related costs. And that's it. I went pretty quick, so hopefully I didn't lose anybody along the way.
Great job, Lawrence. Thanks very much for that. Council, questions, comments, insight? Councillor Oakley.
Thank you very much for very insightful and thorough report. I did enjoy reading it, although at times it gave me a headache thinking about all the numbers. But I guess one of the things I was left with, and it's just a comment, was the need for the community to plan for the future. And when I was looking at the numbers, I just thought, it's probably time now to think about not just repairing these buildings, but actually go further and, plan for new. And one of my questions for you is a new arena. What's the lifespan? Does it go into is it a 100-year lifespan or 80 years? Same thing?
I would say that, generally it's at 85 to 100 years is the maximum that, anybody really says for modern buildings anymore, unfortunately. But, that doesn't mean that it can't last longer, but it's basically the structural systems that we're talking about, not the, the cladding and things like that as much. But
right.
That's generally, you're always going to get the, even a structural engineer is always going to say 100-year building.
I guess one other closing comment I have is a question I had when I was reading through this report. If you have one building with two ice surfaces, does that reduce the lifespan of that building? If you have two, the newer arenas have two surfaces, does that change anything?
No, not really, because what your facilities don't have is like arenas get dehumidification systems put into it now, and there's less rusting that starts to happen under the steel structure and things like that. So there's a lot more systems that go into it. So and actually, the newer buildings are built better, because the building systems are better. But you could have a shared ice plant then. The dressing rooms and things like that could function for both arenas. So, if you had 4 different change rooms, then you were set up for both arenas to, just as far as arena staffing, they can manage that better. So, and in terms of how you lighting controls and things like that, turning things on and off, more controlled ways when things aren't in use, those are all things that would make your building run more effectively, cost effectively over time. But a lot of things have changed. You would definitely not have built these buildings the same way again, I guess is what I'm saying.
Thank you, Councillor Oakley. Councillor McBain.
Yeah, kind of echoing the sentiments that Councillor Oakley had when I was looking through the numbers, and I started thinking a little bit more actually about the less than the cost saving sides, but the potential for more revenue generating. And if you could have a facility, the 2 ice sheets is great. Certainly, that alleviates some of the burden for that both Kimberly and Cranbrook Minor Hockey have had here in the last little bit. But there's also, you know, recognizing that our area is growing rapidly. There's other sports that are really taking off. I can think of like indoor lacrosse is a big one. And, you know, there's opportunities there for us to use a building year round for many more activities than just hockey. So, or you know, any type of skating activity. So, yeah, that was just the thing that jumped out at me. You know, there's just a lot of opportunities with a new facility that, you know, it doesn't just have to be about major events too. There can be ancillary things attached to it as well. You know, Kimberly needs office space as well too. So there's all kinds of opportunities there for me. So that's what jumped out at me at the most.
Thank you, Councillor McBain. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to say that this whole assessment has been a real eye-opener for me. It's very interesting to go into the arena and feel very comfortable and watch the sports take place, and feeling as though maybe we need to have some new sidebars along the side of the ice, or maybe getting a chance to see that the front stairs need to be kind of looked at, and maybe something needs to be done to do a real cursory overview of it. But when you go in deep like you guys have done and take a look at the cracks in the foundation and the very structure of how or how not that building is going to remain, it's really eye-opening. I think the piece that is the most difficult for me is the fact that we are now on the cusp of having to spend 65 to 90 million dollars on a wastewater treatment plant. And where does the replacement of an arena come into our reasoning in all of this? And I think that's part of the whole looking at our asset management program. How much can we afford to fix and that's going to be thrown away and torn down? Or do we have to just bite the bullet and find a way to do something new? So it does create, as much as the information is there, it does create a very interesting dilemma for all of us.
Thank you for that, Councillor Roberts. So I think just for context, the report that has been generated here is full of data. There are no real conclusions. It's analysis and data. And as you will see when we get into the staff report that comes, really what staff needs to do now is to take that data and come back with some strategies, some suggested strategies. And I think as we get into the item on the agenda, Nicole will talk to that. Anything further? All right, excellent. Thanks so much for the presentation and the analysis, Lawrence. Much appreciated.
No worries. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Delegations. Next up, we move into bylaws and permits. First up, we have the Sidewalk Cafe Regulation Bylaw 2713. And the motion on the floor is the council adopt the Sidewalk Cafe Regulation Bylaw for 2022. Councillor McBain moves. Councillor Nigel seconds. Thank you, Councillor Kiddo. Discussion. Troy, are you going to speak to this?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't really have anything else to add. Just remind council that council approved first 3 readings at the last meeting. And this we're recommending here that we will move forward with final approval and adoption of the bylaw, and we'll be able to start implementing right away.
All right. Short and sweet. Thank you, Troy. Council, further questions? Call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. So for the past couple of years, we, during COVID, as a result of COVID, council has waived the sidewalk cafe rules. And we don't need to deal with that this evening, but at a future meeting of council, I would like to bring a resolution forward that we in fact waive the fees for 2022 as well. So I just basically want to give everybody a heads up. Okay, next up, we have item 2.1, pardon me, which is the development variance permit for 2501.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, to interrupt.
Yeah,
Was that a formal notice of motion, or you just want us to have this on the agenda?
no, it's a comment. I will deal with the formal notice of motion outside of the meeting.
Thank you.
So the motion on the floor for this development variance permit is that council approve the variance to the section of the zoning bylaw to allow for the construction of 10 duplex dwelling units, and that council authorize city signatories to execute the discharge of the covenant from title for the subject property. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Dallum, thank you. Councillor McBain seconds. Discussion. Did you want to make any further comments on this, Troy?
Not too much else to add on this one as well. Just to remind council that since the last council meeting, we did send notice out to adjacent property owners and occupants, and just one submission was received in response that was council received earlier in the meeting as a late item. And that was a letter in support of the proposal. So yes, our recommendation stands to move forward with the variance, and my understanding is they're hoping to start construction on these duplexes later this year.
Yeah, outstanding. Okay, council, further comment? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. Thanks very much, Troy. Next up, item 2.2 is the late item, which is the sign development variance permit. Following the meeting a couple of weeks, or I guess it's a month ago now, actually, when this came forward, I went down to take a look at the sign that was in place there right now down in Marysville. Basically, new owner, needs to change the sign because the company name needs to be changed. And in all honesty, I saw nothing with regard to that sign that was either intrusive or in any way was detrimental to the area down there. I went through the sign bylaw again over the years. I've gone through that a couple of times, and it's hard in the current sign bylaw to find the term industrial as it relates to the signage. Now, bear in mind that sign bylaws are fairly generic by definition, and they create a framework. They're not, there is some generality to them. And my feeling on this particular one was that this was not a good use of staff time to be spending on this, and it certainly wasn't worth the proponent spending the thousands of dollars that it was going to take to change this sign. So I requested that this be brought back forward to council, and it is here before us this evening. And I would like for us just to deal with this and to either, I guess, a point of order here, Maurice, if you could, do we need to defeat the existing resolution, or can a separate resolution be put forward?
You can put a different resolution forward, Mr. Mayor. The resolution that had been voted on already had been acted on by staff. Staff had reached out to the applicant and requested more information. So at this stage, we might want to get an update from the planning department.
Any comments, Troy?
No, Marisa is correct there. Following the previous meeting, that this was, I guess, the January 24th meeting that this was previously considered. We have been in touch with the applicant to request an alternative plan, and the only update we have for you there is that we've not received any alternative plan at this time, and we had been waiting on that to receive something there to report back to council on. But if council wishes to reconsider, there is a response option outlined in our original staff report there that council could consider. At this time, staff has no change in their recommendation.
So I'm just looking at that, that council report, Troy. The alternate response option was that council instruct the corporate officer to issue notice to neighbors.
That's the option, yes.
That's what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Okay, so that would be the next step in the process.
If council chooses, yes.
Yeah, okay. So I would like to put forward that response. The council instruct the corporate officer to issue notice to neighbors of the intent to vary the sections of the bylaws outlined in the staff report. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Dallum, thank you very much. Discussion, council. Councillor McBain, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just
Councillor Goodman.
just a general comment. I kind of had the same reaction. I kept telling myself to look for it every time I'd be heading towards Cranbrook or whatever. I would not even see it. Like I'd forget. So which tells me that it's really not obtrusive, the current one there, or visually unappealing. So just based on that, I mean, yeah, it's kind of tough to, especially when you're kind of just switching out the sign from, the old one to the new one. I have a really hard time just kind of zapping this thing off. So it was just a general comment. I just didn't find it to be that big of a deal.
Thank you for that. Councillor Goodwin. There you go.
I guess we made a decision at the last meeting. The decision resulted in a process that planning started. I'm not particularly concerned about the sign one way or the other, but I do like the idea that we support the processes that we put in place, and waiting a little longer to get some response from the proponent about possible alternatives to what he had originally proposed. I think that's a good idea. I think that if we're going to make a decision at a meeting and then some members of council go out and look at it in between meetings and decide that have to change it, I would be better to look at it before we made the original decision, I guess. And so I'm okay to just let things go for now. And if we can't get a resolution, then we may have to revisit this.
Thank you, Councillor Goodwin. Councillor Roberts.
Just as a precedent setting idea is we're hoping to develop the industrial area. And I expect that whoever goes down there will want some signage, and there'll be an expectation that they put their signs up correctly as per the bylaw. So I agree with Councillor Goodwin that just letting the process run through, at least seeing whether or not there's any neighbors that reject it or are uncomfortable with it, and seeing whether or not he can come up with an acceptable suggestion. Maybe we can let that run through, I believe.
So just as a reminder, this is not a new sign. This
Yes,
is
I
an
do know
existing
that.
sign that's having the fascia changed on it.
Yes, I do
Yeah.
know that. So do we have anything in there that says things are supposed to be grandfathered? Probably not.
Go ahead, Councillor Dallum.
So on, excuse me, on the side of the grandfathering, I believe that we don't have any record of this sign being approved previously. That being said, I have looked at it as well, and even previous, I didn't see a lot of a challenge with the appearance of it. I'd like to actually see if it's going to be there, the rest of the lights replaced, so that it's fully lit if it's going to be lit, or fully not lit if it's not going to be lit. That being said, I obviously support staff in the majority of things. I think that if we follow through with this response option, we still have dialogue started with the proponent. So that's going to come back. If we have notice issued to neighbors, I don't see a lot of challenge in diversifying our approach. But I do appreciate the alternative point of view by Councillor Goodwin as well. So I'm a little on the fence right now.
Gee, thanks for that, Councillor Dallum.
My apologies.
Yeah, as I had stated, one of you know, what a key to what I'm talking about here, or to my concern, is that we have a lot of work underway in the planning department right now. And you have to ask if this, you know, continuing to go down this path with this proponent for this particular sign is just worth the time. I respect staff's time and all of the work that's on the table right now. And I just personally don't see it. Councillor Goodwin, go ahead.
I just wanted to respond to Councillor Dellums. If we make the decision right now to go to the public, we've basically told the proponent, don't bother coming back with another proposal, because we've changed our minds and we're okay with what you're doing, if the public is. So, whereas if we don't change it, then there's still a little bit of pressure on the proponent to try to come up with a different option.
All right, enough said. Anything further? All right, having said that, I will call the question. All those in favor of the revised resolution? Those opposed? All right. Councillors Oakley, Goodwin, Roberts, and Kiddo are opposed. The motion is defeated. Okay, carry on, Troy.
Thank you, Council.
Okay, next up under new business, we have the Civic Center and Marysville Arena Building Conditions Assessment. And there's a couple of motions here for council to consider, given the engineering report. The first is that council receive for information the City of Kimberley Building Condition Assessment for both the Civic Center and the Marysville Arena. Mover, Councillor Roberts, thank you, and Councillor McBain seconds. Discussion. So council, any particular, in fact, I'll tell you what, Nicole, why don't you kind of weigh in here with your assessment on where we're at, and then we'll see if there's any further questions from council.
Thank you, Mayor McCormick. I guess in terms of what I see as next steps is, I think what we'll do is sit down, Chris and I will sit down and review the recommendations within the report. There are some immediate actions that have been highlighted that I will be addressing as soon as possible, or we'll be bringing to you for consideration moving forward. But other than that, I think that's the next step, is just an analysis of all of that information. There is a lot of it there. And I think it's a deeper conversation about where we see ourselves in the future, what kind of money can we invest in, what kind of projects, where do we see our community going, and what items within the assessments could potentially be applied for through grants moving forward. I think this document gives us a lot of information, and it gives us an ability to go out and find and match granting to specific components outlined within. So I think it's an opportunity to really dig in and find out what the community needs. So.
All right, thank you for that, Nicole. Councillor McBain.
Hey, Nicole, I was just curious. I got thinking about, you know, like boards replacement and stuff. And I know I'm not exactly sure if the Civic Center, the way the concrete is set right now for kind of that encircles the current boards, if you'd be able to get, you know, a regulation size sheet in there. I was just thinking about the potential of if we got new boards for the Civic Center, you know, most systems now are pretty modular, and they're quite easy to reuse. You know, I just didn't know if that would be an option, given the constraints of the Civic Center, and you know, the way it's not kind of the usual slab that a newer rink would be.
Thank you for that, Councillor McBain. I think ultimately it'll probably be working with the engineers and sizing out what that potentially could look like. I do see some issues with those existing boards that are in there are not traditional. They're not the prefabbed ones. So they are rooted within the slab itself. So I don't know if we can remove one without the other because of the age and how intertwined the two are.
Well, I just want to clarify maybe what, if we were to put a new floor and put new boards in, is kind of what I was getting at. If, you know, say 10 years down the road, we decide that we need a new building, 10 years from now, could we get away with, purchasing new boards, redoing the floor in the Civic Center, but then reuse those, to try to save costs on the road? That's where I was kind of going with that.
I think you're on the right track for sure.
Councillor Kiddo.
I was also, like Councillor Goodwin, very surprised about the replacement costs for the Marysville Arena in particular in the report. I was wondering, if Nicole, if you had a take on that.
Thank you, Councillor Kiddo. I guess it's based on square footage of the ultimate size of the building. And when you look at the square footage of the two buildings, it is relatively close in size. Just knowing a little bit about putting it to the programming end of things, the cost of a slab doesn't really change from one facility to the next. Boards don't really change from one to the next. So a lot of those core ice components within, I think like Lawrence had alluded to within his presentation, there's a link between the two facilities. So that would be my instinct, is that's why the costs are similar. Again, I think we need to get in and really dive into what those numbers look like and compare the two reports.
Scott.
Hi, Nicole, it's Scott. Just wanted to ask if you could maybe make sure that the mezzanine had been accounted for. Because really, when you're looking at replacement costs of that building, there's a big difference between the two arenas in terms of total volume of space. And the arena has proven to be quite an addition and a whole different community asset as far as the walking track goes. So can we just confirm with the engineering company that that has been accounted for?
Thank you, Scott. Certainly will do.
Yeah, and I also think that, you walk into the building, the first thing you see is 1,500 seats. You don't see that when you walk into the Marysville Arena. So, I think there's this perception of a lot of the amenities inside the arena that they have to cost money of some kind, beyond the generic square footage. Nigel, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just be very concerned on those cost estimates that if we were replacing two, we'd end up with two arenas at the standard of the Civic Centre, which is not what we're using them for. I just don't think it's a fair comparison at all. I really don't trust that in the report at all.
Councillor Goodwin.
Yeah, Troy, are you still out there? Troy?
Kent to Troy.
He may have left.
I am still here. Sorry about that.
Troy, on the planning information portal, there's a measurement tool that you can use to measure areas of things in Kimberley. And when I measure the two arenas, I come up with different numbers than what's in the report. Is that tool accurate?
Yeah, it should be fairly accurate. I mean, there could be a little bit of discrepancy just depending on kind of, how much you're zoomed into the image and maybe possible misinterpretation of edge of building footprint or outline of building footprint. But
It would set my heart at ease if someone who knows what they're doing could take that tool and run it over the two arenas and just see what areas you get, because I keep getting different ones. The Kimberley Arena is considerably bigger than the Marysville, and anyway, it's got me. I want to sleep at night, and I don't understand how I'm getting it wrong. So if someone could do that, that would be great.
If I could just add something, Mayor?
Yep, go ahead.
So the documents used were provided via our blueprints that we have on file for both facilities. So again, we can dig back into those numbers, and I certainly can have Lawrence and his team ensure they are correct, and we will do the same on our end. But again, the numbers come from the structural drawings we provided the firm.
All right, thanks a lot, Nicole. Okay, last comment, Councillor Oakley, and then we have to move forward.
Just one question for Nicole, just a comment, and a question. The preliminary meetings that you are going to have with the manager of operations, with Chris, I'm just wondering, is the CFO involved with those meetings?
Thank you, Councillor Oakley. Yes, I certainly think that Jim would be involved within those conversations.
I guess the reason I'm asking is to me, you know, he's always been straight up with how much money we have or don't have. And I think out of those meetings would come kind of a sense of what is an immediate fix for the arenas, what's the mid-range, and then what's the long-term plan for the community as it grows. You know, I think that, you know, 20 years from now, there's a very real possibility that they're going to have a new building. And that's a fact, just going to be the way it is. But that's just my take on it. I hope that Jim has been, you know, he's always been there with the numbers, especially given we're faced with such massive infrastructure needs now, especially the wastewater treatment plant. Councillor McBain was talking about that a minute ago. Anyway, thanks for all of your work to you, Nicole, and also Chris. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so once again, just a reminder, the step in between is developing a particular strategy. And then once the strategy is in place, then the numbers can be, so we're a couple of steps away yet from, you know, from definitive numbers. Did you have something else to add, Scott?
I was going to craft a segue into the second resolution where Jim will be involved because we're going to put forth recommendations to go into the 5-year financial plan. So we did also talk earlier about Jim's involvement in this. So yes, absolutely.
So let's call the question on the first resolution. All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. And the second resolution is to direct staff to bring a report summarizing key findings of the assessment to a future meeting for council's consideration, and that the recommendations contained would be part of the 2022-2026 financial plan. Councillor McBain moves and Councillor Dallum seconds. Further discussion? All those in favor? All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Got to see 6 hands, guys. Okay, next up we have the City Hall and the RCMP roof repair and replacement resolution. And that is that council approve the award of the City Hall and RCMP administration building roof repairs and replacement to Western Roofing in an amount not to exceed $284,000 inclusive of PST, exclusive of GST. And further, it's a multi-pronged resolution. Further, that council directs staff to prepare a contract between the city and Western Roofing. And further, that council authorize the CAO to execute the contract for City Hall and RCMP roofing repairs and replacements. Let's stop there. We'll do the last one following this. Councillor Roberts moves and Councillor McBain seconds. Discussion. Chris, are you going to speak to this, or Nicole?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry about that. Facilities Manager Nicole, away you go.
No issues. I just wanted to draw council's attention to a correction within the last of the recommendations regarding the $41,000. That number is actually $41,400, just editing error on our part, and that coming from the general operating and capital reserve.
All right, comments on the projects themselves? Anything you'd like to say?
I believe this project has been on the books now for 2 years. Chris can correct me if I was wrong there. However, when I first arrived last year, an RFP was issued with no interested proposals submitted to the community. We went out and early this year in 2022 to try and get out first to the market, and ended up receiving quotes with some inflated costs as a result of supply chain demands from the proposal description.
Have we made out better as we have waited?
Unfortunately, Mayor, no, we have not.
Just curious. Okay, council, questions or comments? Hearing none, call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. And the second resolution, or the last resolution, I should say, with respect to this, is that council directs staff to increase the combined budgets previously approved in the amount of $41,400 in order to identify the funding gaps already discussed. Councillor Roberts, thank you. Councillor Kiddo seconds. Further discussion? All those in favor? That motion is carried. All right, next up, big night for facilities, Nicole. Next up, we have the Center 64 roof repair and replacement. The resolution is that council approve the award for the Center 64 Arts and Culture Center roof repair to Stoic Industries in the amount of $456,204.53. That is inclusive of PST, exclusive of GST. And further, the council directs staff to prepare a contract between the city and Stoic Industries. And finally, that council authorize the CAO to execute the agreement between the city and Stoic Industries. Councillor Roberts moves and Councillor Goodwin seconds. Comments, Nicole?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, this project was originally put out to RFP in 2021. We had no interest from the building community. We went on early in the market of 2022 and received one proposal for the works to be completed. You'll remember during budget deliberations for capital investment, we did increase this budget, anticipating inflation would happen. And unfortunately, we did come in under budget for the allotment, allowing for a bit of a contingency when that project advances.
All right, thank you, Nicole. Councillor Dallin?
Nicole, if you don't mind just putting a note down on this one that when we have a timeline that we can get in touch with Center 64 so that they have a bit of time to get the seats out of the way and be ready, please.
Thank you, Councillor Dallum. In fact, we've already started that process with them, and I'm meeting on site tomorrow with the contractor potentially to discuss timelines.
You rock.
Thank you, Nicole. Further comments? Go ahead, Scott.
I just want to say how nice it is to see us work on things like foundations and roofs, really on our core buildings. And just to commend staff. I've never seen tenders go out this early. I know we had a bit of a head start because no one bid on them last year, so we had to dust them off. But the budgeting has been great. And as you'll see over the coming months, the tenders going out are going out so early this year. It's really nice to see, particularly when there's supply chain and availability issues. So my kudos to staff.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks for that, Scott. I should also, I guess I'll ask the question for confirmation that all of these projects are fully funded. This is not going to result in anything outside of what we have with current reserves, correct?
No, fully funded. Some of them are even grant driven. So
even better.
Even better. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Scott. Okay. Further questions or comments? Go ahead, Councillor Oakley.
Just had one question for Nicole as I was going through this, or Chris, probably Nicole. What's the existing insulation value? I see the new stuff goes to R40 for the new roof. I was just curious what's currently in there. Is there much for insulation? It's probably zero, eh?
I haven't come across anything, so I would suggest that it's not the greatest.
Councillor Roberts?
Well, I happen to know the answer to that because I had to put the installation in there, but that was 40 years ago.
So the answer is?
The answer is it's R20, and it has to be a minimum of R20 anywhere you're putting a whole bunch of people in close quarters in the dark. So.
Further, Councillor Oakley? Okay, we'll call the question on the series of resolutions. All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. The motions are carried. All right, next up, we have the 2022 Annual Road Rehabilitation Program, which is the tender award. And again, thanks, Chris, for early work on this. February is a great time to be getting these out. I think we get the best prices early in the year. Great work on what you've done here. The resolutions we have on the table are that Council award the 2022 Annual Road Rehabilitation Program to Power Paving Limited of Cranbrook in the amount not to exceed $289,701.50 plus taxes. And further, the Council authorize the CAO or his appointed designate to execute the contract documents associated with the award. And further, the Council authorize the expenditure of the remaining $86,839 budgeted for the program in 2022 as follows: $60,000 for payment patching in various areas of the community and $26,839 to fund any unexpected costs associated with completion of the 2022 program. Councillor Roberts moves. Councillor McBain seconds. Discussion. Did you want to make a comment before we run this through, Chris?
Yeah, I can just give a quick brief on that if you don't mind.
Please.
Certainly, we're very excited to have this out early this year. It's a goal that we've been looking to achieve, and I'd like to thank the staff that have been working on this. They've done a great job at pulling this together and getting it out. The $60,000 for paving patching, that's an amount that we typically use throughout the road infrastructure for patching those areas that are in rough shape and require attention. It also helps us out with the cold mix and things like that we have to do in the time of year when we can't use hot mix. So those are some funds that we would like to keep in the roads department for just looking after all those incidentals that come up along the way. There is 5 individual projects on the list here this year that are reflected with the maps that are provided as well. 2 of those projects are on 7th Avenue that will be supporting some work that will be done there for active transportation as well. So I just wanted to kind of tie those together a little bit.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Chris. Council, questions or comments? Councillor Dallum, go ahead.
I just wanted to double check if there's any plans for subgrade infrastructure when the repaving happens.
There's always consideration for subgrade work in those areas. We try to do a pretty careful job of analyzing ahead of the project. So any areas that we think we're going to need to do sub-base work is already included in the proposal.
Excellent as always. Thank you.
Further? Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thanks very much, Chris.
Yep. Thank you, Council.
All right. Next up, we have a resolution for a proposed electric vehicle charging station at Marysville Echo Park. And the resolution is that Council approve the contribution of up to $1,000 toward the purchase and installation of 1 level 2 charging station at Marysville Echo Park, with balance of funding up to $9,000 from the Targeted Regional Tourism Initiative, as outlined in the letter of agreement with the Community Energy Association. And further, that the manager of planning be authorized to execute the letter of agreement with the Energy Association. And further, that the CFO be directed to include the expenditure of $1,000 in the 2022-2026 5-year financial plan bylaw. Councillor Dallum moves. Councillor McBain seconds. Any discussion? Is this your item, Troy?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll speak
ahead.
very briefly to this. Just an excellent opportunity to expand the EV charging network in the community with really a minimal contribution from the city, I guess. This funding program, we've already confirmed that we are eligible and that the Marysville Eco Park location will be a suitable location to meet all of the requirements of the program. I do want to say thanks and shout out to Andrew Chapman at Wildsite, who who brought this opportunity to our attention, and of course their role in some of the improvements and enhancements to the eco park in the past. This is, fits in well with some mutual objectives there from both the city and from Wild Site. Sorry. So yeah, we're recommending that we proceed here as indicated in the resolution, and we should be able to get that installed later this spring in time for hopefully a busy summer.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Troy. Can you summarize for us where the other stations are?
Yes, there's one at the Visitor Info Center under the solar carport, one at the Aquatic Center, and one here at City Hall.
All right, are they all level 2 charging stations?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. Now, can you just describe what level 2 means?
Level 2 is kind of the slower charge, so it works well when someone has, depending on how much their vehicle needs to charge, probably enough time to grab a coffee at the very least, or perhaps go and maybe go for lunch or do some shopping for an hour or two, depending on the charge required. But it really works well if people need to take a break from their travels or do some exploring around the community while they're here and while their vehicle's charging. The level 3 is the quick charge that can charge, do a full vehicle charge in 20 to 30 minutes, I think.
Right.
Again, depending on the level of charge required.
All right. Thanks for that, Troy. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Council, questions or comments? Go ahead, Nigel.
Just a comment, really. Great location. Hadn't thought of it before. Probably would be a really good location for a bike charging station as well.
It is amazing how popular the Marysville Falls are, and having that painted and kind of parking lines put on last year has just improved that area down there immensely. So we have the washroom down there now. The addition of the EV charging station. It's going to be an awesome spot for our visitors to park. Go ahead, Scott.
And Troy, I'm hoping we have a bit of budget left over for wayfinding signage so we can point people to our shiny new EV charging station and shiny new washrooms down there.
Yeah, actually what works best is the folks traveling in their electric vehicles will have a mapping system to lead them right to the charging options within the community and elsewhere in the region. So we won't really need any signage on the highway.
Kent, last comment?
Yeah, I think this is a great idea. I think we need to keep looking for more opportunities. You have to build out the infrastructure in advance in order to get people to invest in electric cars. And we really need to do that. And then Putin's oil won't count for anything once we're all electrified.
All right. On that note, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, Council. Next up, we have the 2022 BC Winter Games Legacy Grant allocation. The motion is the Council approve the allocation of the 2022 Winter Games Legacy Grants with a combined total of $6,228 available funding. Councillor Dalla moves. Councillor Roberts seconds. Yeah, it's not a lot of funding, and we had some significant applications. Pam, did you want to give us a bit of an overview?
Sorry, my video doesn't want to work. Oh, there we go. Yes, thanks very much, Mr. Mayor and Council, for your quick voting on this. We had $26,000 applied for. We only had $6,000 to give away. I did reach out to all of those applicants and let them know, or anybody that had put in a significant application, and let them know the amount of money that we had. And they said anything that we were able to contribute to the program would be amazing. So I'm sure they'll be very appreciative of what we have, and a lot of them apply to our other grant programs. So yeah, thank you very much. If you had any questions regarding the applicants or allocations in particular.
So one question is the 6,228, is that a per capita allocation, or how do we know how much we get?
It's interest earned on the accounts, actually. Councillor Goodwin could probably help. He's the one that sent us the check.
Councillor Goodwin.
Yeah, so the money that Or these grants comes from the original Winter Games Legacy Fund that the city held many, many decades ago, which has been augmented a couple of times by other winter and summer games. And all of that money was given, well, the original amount was given to the local community foundation and invested by the Vancouver Foundation. And so the interest check that comes every year is just turned over to the city in its entirety, and whatever it is, it is. And if we can build that fund, then the amounts will get bigger, but that requires people to donate to those funds. So,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Kent. Anything else, Pam?
No, Mr. Mayor.
No. All right, council, questions, comments? Call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thanks, Pam. Appreciate
Thank
all your
you.
hard work on that. Next up, we have the October to December final quarter of the year procurement report. And the motion is that council receive for information the procurement report for the last quarter. Mover, please. Councillor Kiddo, thank you. Councillor Oakley seconds. Discussion. Jim, did you want to weigh in on this one?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's not a whole lot to report in the last quarter of the year here. Most of the competitive processes are held earlier in the year. We'll be bringing the report forward on the first quarter of 2022 shortly here, and I think council will be quite surprised, as I was, with how much activity is taking place. I think on BC Bid currently we've got 7 projects tendered out, and that's in addition to the ones we've awarded already. So yeah, first quarter of this year will be a lot busier than the report you see here tonight.
Thank you, Jim. Council, questions or comments? All right, hearing none, call the question on receipt. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Next up, we have the check run in the amount of $463,096.30 to be approved.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Maurice?
There is the financial update report as well that we skipped over.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I put a check mark beside the wrong item. Let's deal with the check run first, since I've already indicated what the motion is on that. Mover, please. Councillor McBain moves and Councillor Goodwin seconds. Anything out of the ordinary to point out, council? Hearing none, call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. All right, last up then, in this section, we have the financial update report for January to December. It's our year-end report. And the motion is that council receive for information the financial update report for the year. Mover, please. Councillor McBain, thank you. Councillor Kiddo seconds. Discussion. Highlights, Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a bit of a disclaimer to start off with here. Despite the fact that this is a year-end report, the numbers won't be finalized, of course, until we complete the year-end process and the audit is done. So there's still a chance that the numbers here might be adjusted a bit before the end of the year. Just quickly run through some highlights here. On the revenue side of things, you'll see that Parks and Facilities was at 116% of the budgeted revenue. The Aquatic Center brought in about $50,000 more revenue than we had anticipated. We were speculating when we put the budget together, given the impacts of COVID and the facility closure and slowdown. So that was a nice surprise to get more than the anticipated amount of revenue there. Planning Services, you'll see that the revenue there was just about 150% of budget. That relates to the strong construction season that we saw in 2022 or 2021, sorry, with the building permit revenue was significantly higher than what we had anticipated. The fire department revenue is under budget, and that is related to the forest management program, the grants. We didn't get as much of that work done as we had anticipated, just given the weather we had last summer. So the revenue is under budget there. The expenditure side of things, everything is really fairly close to budget. There's not a lot that varied very far. Human Resources is the furthest below budget. and that was just due to the fact that with COVID, there wasn't as much training conference money spent, and some of the anticipated retirements that we had budgeted for didn't happen either. On the capital side of things, there was a few projects, a few larger projects that didn't get completed. As council is aware, the Boundary Street project went out to bid in 2021. We didn't receive any bids that were within budget, so that project was deferred to 2022. So that's a big part of the reason why roads, water, and sewer are under budget there in capital. Another big one was the Civic Center slab and board replacement. It was budgeted at over 1.2 million. We did not get a grant, so that project was again carried forward into the next year. Yeah, so those are the big ones and the highlights, Mr. Mayor. If there are any questions from council, I'll be happy to answer.
All right, thank you, Jim. Councillor Dallin.
Jim, on page 6 of 16, under Parks and Facilities, in the expenditures, there's a addition of 18,604 to brine pump repairs.
Yes.
And that's not reflected in the numbers. So I'm just wondering if that's to be kind of titled, or how's that? What am I missing? Because I understand I'm struggling with that.
Yeah, the 2021 budget figure that's shown there, the 35,463, is the total of the 18,659, which was the original budget, and the 18,604 that was added to that budget with financial plan amendment bylaw 2708. So just a note there, in a previous the report from a previous quarter would have just had the 18,659, and then once that bylaw amendment was adopted, it did change. So I just wanted to make note of that for council's information.
Just because I'm struggling further, if I may.
Yep.
18.6 and 18.6 is 37,000, right?
Quite right.
Okay.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Councillor Dallin. That appears to be just an adding error.
Honestly, if you can make a mistake once in a blue moon, and I appreciate everything you do. Thank you.
Thanks for pointing that out. Appreciate it.
Further, council? Okay, hearing none. Nothing further. We'll call the question. All those in favor? That motion is carried. Okay, we have a couple of items on correspondence. The first one has an action associated with it. So let's move receipt of item 1.1. Councillor McBain, thank you. Councillor Goodwin seconds. So discussion on this. It's basically a letter from the BC Association of Farmers Markets for a letter of support. Council has probably read through that. Go ahead, Councillor Goodwin. Councillor McBain seconds. Further comment?
Mr. Mayor,
Go
I
ahead.
believe we need to vote on the receipt before we put another motion on the table.
Okay. We can do that. Can't have the motion within the motion. Okay, so move receipt. We already have that receipt moved. All those in favor of receipt? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Councillor Goodwin moves. Letter of support. Councillor McBain seconds. All those in favor? Motion is carried. And we had the informational items. Mover, please. Councillor Goodwin, thank you. Councillor McBain seconds. Any discussion? Call the question. All those in favor of receipt? Motion is carried. All right, that concludes the, pardon me, the formal part of the meeting, and we move on now to question period, where members of the public may call and ask questions on anything that has been contained in tonight's meeting. Should you wish to call in, the number is 800-741-7180. And when prompted, the meeting number, the meeting number, pardon me, is 2481-523-1467. Once again, that meeting number is 2481-523-1467. It's going to be so nice when we can get this back into council chamber again. Doing these types of call-ins is extremely awkward, and I appreciate the members of the public patience as we move our way through the process. So while we are waiting to see if we have any callers, we'll do councillor items. Who would like to start this evening? Do I have a volunteer? Councillor Roberts, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Had an opportunity to sit in on the Kimberley Nature Park meeting last week. They're happy to report they're going to meet in person next month. I found an interesting sidebar was they are working with the ACOM to rename a number of the names of trails in the nature park that are sensitive, names of Indigenous folks used in a way that's not necessarily appropriate any longer. And so they're working with the ACOM, I think it is, and they are hoping to come up with some suggestions that are Indigenous names for those trails that will work really well. They're a really good bunch of folks. They're very attentive to the flora and fauna of the area and doing their bird counts and whatnot. I asked them, they asked for backyard bird count. I asked them if they were counting the turkeys, but they didn't think they were. That was it.
All right, thank you, Councillor Roberts. Councillor Kiddo.
Nothing to report tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Dallum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nothing official since last report.
Kent.
I guess the one thing that I would like to get out is that the Kimberley Health Center Society has learned that its long-standing facility manager, Wayne Keever, is retiring. And so we have just posted a half-time position. We're looking for a new facility manager, 20 hours a week, to look after the center for us. So if people could spread the word, and hopefully we get some really good candidates. We're looking for someone who knows a bit about buildings, but also someone who has good people skills to work with all the tenants that we have, and hopefully the new tenants that we're going to get. So, and that's my major news.
All right, thank you. Councillor Oakley.
One meeting, Kimberley Youth Action Network, Mr. Mayor, and I have a very long list of their activities. They're extremely busy group. And I have that list on my phone, which is sitting on my counter at home at the moment. So anyway, I will say that the Kimberley Youth Action Network, they are involved in all sorts of different things around Kimberley, and Laura Jo is coordinating that and keeping everyone very busy. Currently, they are headquartered in the on the main floor of the log house beside Centex. So where Mountain City Travel was there before. Yeah, so they're there now. And I went to the meeting, and then I also was invited by Laura Jo to go and meet with the kids when they were doing a painting one afternoon right after high school. So it was nice to meet them. Nice to say hi to everybody. So they're very busy, in summary. Very busy group. It's nice to see that.
All right, thank you, Councillor Oakley. Jason.
Yeah, two official meetings over the last little bit. As Kent mentioned, one was the health center society, and then the other still having ongoing meetings with the library committee, and then obviously through budget deliberations too that Greg presented tonight. So that's what I've been up to.
All right, thank you. I will make mention of a couple of things in the past 2 weeks. I'll leave the various calls and meetings with individuals aside and talk a little bit about the regional district and the hospital board, both of which had committee and board meetings here over the last couple of weeks. I'll forward the summary of items that have come out of that. As I mentioned before, if there's anything specific to Kimberly that comes out of it, I'll make sure and mention it at the meeting. But it was mostly rural district items that came up. So not too much to report on there, other than it took a fair amount of time. The hospital board had its elections for chair and vice chair. David Wilkes was elected chair, and who's elected vice chair? It's going to kill me. No. My apologies. I have momentarily slipped who was elected vice chair. But the important thing is Dave Wilkes is the chair of the regional hospital board, and he is replacing the retiring Dean McCarricker from Elkford. Dean has made a decision not to run in the fall election, so therefore is resigning his position on the hospital board as well. Dean has long level of service, and he's done an outstanding job for the regional district with respect to the hospital board. He will be missed, but I'm sure Dave will do an awesome job. So in addition, I had a meeting with the provincial folks who are doing the chief negotiator and his assistant for the Tanaha Kinbasket Treaty Advisory Committee. I think I mentioned when I was here last time that I have been elected to be the regional representative at the treaty negotiations table. Negotiations are stalled right now, actually on hiatus for a number of reasons, and we're not sure exactly when they're going to start again. However, it will give me a little bit of time to get climatized to exactly what has been going on and what my role and responsibilities are around the table. It was a great meeting with provincial folks, and I'm pretty comfortable that that's going to be a great experience. I also would be remiss if I didn't mention Family Day and Flannel Fest over the weekend. Between Archie and Karen, they've done another, I think this is the 5th annual. They've done an outstanding job of putting together an event under difficult circumstances, kind of tiptoeing between the minefield on COVID. And we thank them very much for all of the efforts that they put forward. Okay, that's it. Vicky, do we have any callers?
There are no callers on the line.
I am completely surprised by that. Okay, we do have a closed meeting this evening. So what I would like to do now is ask for a mover to move to closed. Councillor Dallum, thank you. And Councillor McBain seconds. All those in favor? That motion is carried. Let's take 2 minutes while